The big questions are, how do business owners like us spending our own money, time, and effort? How do we grow our businesses and jump the line? That lets us accelerate the delivery of our products, services in our community while being smart about our growth, profits, culture, and still create lasting value in our business. Those are the questions, and this podcast will share some of those answers. Today's guest is Cameron Kolb. He's a senior broker with Raincatcher. My name is Bob Roark. Welcome to Business Leaders Podcast. Today's guest is Cameron Kolb. He's the senior broker at Raincatcher. Cameron, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be with you, Bob.
Well, Cameron, thanks for taking time. It's a Friday afternoon. Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of bring us up to date on where you are now.
Yeah, so I started my professional career at Northwestern Mutual doing financial planning. So initially started with insurance, and we started to work in the niche of business owners because we just felt like that was a really good need there. And as we expanded into investments and more and more licenses that got, really started to specialize in exit planning. So worked with a lot of physicians and business owners. I did that for about 6 years, and then the death in the family kind of just caused me to rethink things, and then ultimately decided that based on what I've experienced with all these business owners and how difficult of a time they've had trying to sell their business, I thought there might be some opportunity to help essentially do business brokerage. So, my path after that was basically that I went out on my own, learned how to do business brokering, did it on my own for about 5 years, and then was asked to join Raincatcher back in May this year, which has just been great. It's gone from being a solo practitioner to doing everything that there is to do, to now I get to really just focus in on what I'm great at, which is bringing buyers and sellers to the table and getting deals done.
I think about the compare and contrast between the team approach to a business sale versus the sole practitioner approach to bring it to a sale. And what it reminds me is the difference between having a job and having a business. Like for the sole practitioner, there might have been an expertise that you didn't have. It might be franchising. It might be, one type of specialist event. Whereas at Raincatcher, you guys have depth of field. I don't know that there's a specialty you guys haven't covered.
Yeah, I thought I was smart, and then I started working with some really smart people, and I realized there's a lot that I didn't even know I didn't know. But it's being able to bring 4 or 5 minds together on a deal as we're working it. It's just made a huge difference in the execution, and really the progress that I've made just as a business professional. Essentially in my field, I've just learned a lot about what you can do to add a lot more value than I previously been doing. There's definitely different ways to sell businesses as a business broker, and I thought I'd been doing it the best way, and then sure enough, I learned that there's better ways to do it, which it's humbling.
I think that's interesting to maybe expand on that a little bit. You think about, I thought I knew this way to sell a business, and then I've matured or adjusted. What was it that you used to think, and what do you think now?
So in my mind, before joining Raincatcher, I kind of assumed that the deal was done in the conversations between the buyers and the sellers. So my goal was really to get people through the process, get them an NDA, get them qualified to the point where I felt comfortable sharing all the information, and I would keep the information relatively simple and high level with the idea of kind of an in or out, and then get them on a conversation with the actual sellers. And that's where I felt like most value was created. So I just didn't spend as much time on that initial document presentation. And, ultimately, I think my goal was to find the best buyer at the moment. And what we've been able to do, or essentially what's different now, is we spend a lot more time on the material itself. So the SIM, which is the confidential information memorandum, that is a lot higher quality than the information I've been putting out there before. But also, one of the other key things is that we focus on the buyer process and keeping as many buyers active and in the same stage of the process at the same time. So that way, when we're ready to call for offers, we've got a handful of buyers who are still interested. And by doing that, you're able to drive the price up to essentially what the market will really allow, as opposed to what maybe one or two buyers might have been on using my previous method. We still got deals done, and the sellers were still happy with them, but there's potentially a little bit of money left on the table just by having a better process than we do now.
On the sim, I think some folks may or may not know. The folks that have sold a business before probably do. The ones that haven't may not. And that's what confidential information memorandum.
Correct. Yep. So essentially what Raincatcher has been able to do is we've taken the approach that a lot of the investment banks and the high level, maybe boutique M&A firms do when selling a business. So we brought it down to, I want to say it's more Main Street small business, but really it's the businesses that are doing somewhere between like 1 million to 20 million of revenue. Mm-hmm. And we brought that really professional process down to that size business because it felt like there was this gap that was not being served by those industries, mainly because it makes perfect sense, as a business owner, if you can make a lot more money on a bigger deal, but put in a similar amount of work, you're usually going to take the bigger deals. But I think having the servant heart that always wanted to help business owners, and coming from a family of business owners myself, I've got this passion, this place in my heart for what I'd say is the backbone of America. It's those businesses that employ way more people than the bigger businesses.
There were some stats, I think, after the market events in 2008, and said 72% of all new jobs developed in this country after 2008 came from small business. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of people know that. And, in smaller communities and even in the bigger communities, you look around at the business owners and you may not, the employment is not the Lockheeds and Boeings in every town necessarily. And, for me, I didn't come from a business family background. My father was military, and of course I was military. And then you started getting involved in the business community, and my admiration for those folks that are self-starters and overcame many different challenges, is like you. I'm a fan, and I really like watching what they do. And circling back a bit to what you said in the beginning, you were working with physicians' practices and so on, in your previous life. What was it? What's your perspective on the physician professional trying to sell their practice, having been through small business and exit planning now? What are their challenges?
The challenges for physicians? Yeah. It's a really unique landscape for physicians right now. It seems like all the really big entities are essentially gobbling up all these smaller practices. And to sell a physician practice is actually really difficult because you have to find someone who's in that same specialty and is at the perfect place in their career where they can come in, buy your practice. They've got capital, they've got credit, they've got the financing they need, but also they've got the knowledge to run a practice, within whatever specialty it is. So I think that's what's led to a lot of those physicians having to sell to the bigger conglomerates and essentially becoming a part of United Healths and, there's so many conglomerates, but ultimately I think that's what's probably caused that. Whenever I have conversations with sellers, I always try to just do a preliminary search of how many practices like theirs are out there being sold. And there's actually quite a few, which tells me that there's not a lot of movement, especially when you look at how long those businesses have been listed. So I think that's one of the big challenges is finding their successor, if that's going to be something they do. And if not, figuring out the exit plan that's going to work for their long-term goals. But I think a physician practice is probably one of the hardest to sell because so much is dependent on that one person, which is the physician or the group of physicians.
And when you look at the small non-physician business marketplace, do you see similar problems in determining the difference between a job and a business that these folks have? Yeah,
I'd say it's definitely more prevalent in the physician practices, at least the private physician practices. When you look at the small businesses, there's kind of like this threshold where you go from self-employed to business owner. And it's a mentality switch where, previously I was a self-employed person. I was aware of that when I was working by myself. I knew I was a business owner in the sense that I filed all the business filings, but at the end of the day, my business was me. And, I think I probably lack the drive to grow something and have that bigger business where I'm relying on a lot of people, just the way I'm built. And I think that that's probably what happens. Sometimes you've got some specialists, say you've got, an engineer who's really good at engineering things, and then they realize that they need more capacity. So they hire some other folks to help with all those other things, but they're still doing a lot of the engineering work. More often than not, that's going to be more of like a self-employed, even though it's more of a business. I think the true businesses out there are the ones where the seller has learned how to delegate correctly. And they've been able to take this wider range of tasks that they have to do when they start working. They've been able to just snip off little pieces of their day-to-day to-do tasks and assign them to someone else. And I think when you can do that and focus on being a business owner instead of a widget maker, an engineer, or physician, I think that's the difference between something that's going to sell on the market, as a business, or one that's going to be really difficult to sell. It's probably not going to sell for much if it does.
When you run across a business owner that's considering transacting and selling their business, do you think there's a level of awareness as to whether they actually are ready to sell or they've got a job instead of a business?
Oh, goodness. It's a wider range, like it's everything, right? You get a little bit of everything in our field, but, more often than not, a seller's timeline is kind of, abstract. It's, I'd like to sell my business someday, and that someday is hopefully in the next like 2 or 3 years, unless it's more of like an urgent situation, but those are that usually like those are tied to like health or something family or something like that. But more often than not, a business owner doesn't really know what the process is to sell a business. They're not really sure what the timeline is going to look like. So, a lot of our job is just coaching and educating about what that process looks like. And in terms of kind of those self-employed folks, a lot of the time what we have to turn to is just sharing that they probably are at a place where they need to do a couple of things to make their business more sellable. So we'll incorporate some coaches. We have exit planning coaches that are specifically trained in getting a business from where it is to a place that it's sellable. We do that through a program called Value Builder. So it's John Warlow's program. He's out of Toronto and he wrote a couple books. I Built to Sell is one of them. It's probably the better known of them. But yeah, he's essentially created a program that helps coaches have a platform by which to then coach that seller through, I think, 12 modules and 12 key areas to focus on. It's 12 modules. It's one a month, but there's 8 key areas that I get focused on.
For you were mentioning process. So let's say I'm a business owner and I'm considering selling my business, maybe now, or maybe when, upon advice, I'm thinking about it. Walk me through kind of the steps or process that you have when you have somebody that reaches out to you.
Sure. I mean, from start to finish, you kind of,
if I'm the potential business owner getting ready to sell and I'm going like, well, what am I going to hear? Their process, and go, so kind of walk us through the steps.
Sure. So I guess first and foremost, high level, it takes usually 6 to 9 months to sell a business that is ready to be sold. Mm-hmm. So by ready to be sold, I mean that they've got everything ready. They've got some key employees that they've figured out how to retain once the sale's done. If that's the case, they're not super critical to the business success. So they're more in a management or business oversight function as opposed to being like in the day-to-day operations of a business. They've got clean financials. So meaning that typically their profit and loss statement, their taxes tell the same story, which is a lot less common than you think. Or, if there's cash that's getting paid, sometimes that's not disclosed. So it's all sorts of different things like that. But Let's say that you've got a business that is ready. Usually at 6 to 9 months from the time that they start working with us, we should look at having, a deal done. And that deal typically is kind of broken into 3 stages. The first stage is getting the business ready to go to market, and then going to market, and then closing the deal. In that getting the business ready stage, typically we're going to do some sell side due diligence. What we've learned is a lot of deals will look great on paper until you get into due diligence on them. And then all of a sudden some random thing that wasn't known will kill the deal. So during that first get the business ready period, we want to find those issues now and figure out how to address them. If they can't be fixed, then we need to figure out how to disclose them. It's nothing, someone once told me it's way better to disclose something upfront than for someone to find it out later, just because of the trust that gets lost along the way. So we do a lot of the sell side due diligence to really dig into the company's financials, taxes, operations, staffing, procedures, all of those key elements we're going to take a good look at. Our entire team will. And then once we feel really good about that process, then we start creating a SIM, which is that, it's a marketing booklet, for lack of saying those really long words again. So that typically is going to take us about 2 weeks to do. We've leveraged our whole team. And typically it's going to be a copywriter, it's going to be a graphic artist, and then broker, associate broker, and then broker support. We're all putting in our thoughts and everything to get that SIM ready. Seller reviews it, says, yep, that works. We get all the teaser, all the listing information that we're going to put out into the internet. We get that all drafted and approved by the seller, and then we go to market. So once we're in market, we typically reach out 3 main areas. The first area is going to be our internal buyer pool. So all of the people that we've met along the way from trying to sell a business that maybe didn't buy a business because it wasn't a good fit. Maybe the time wasn't right. Maybe it cost too much, whatever, but we've kept them in our database. So we reach out to them because they're active buyers. Secondly, we're going to create a list of strategic buyers and financial buyers. So depending on the size of the business, sometimes financial buyers aren't relevant, but strategic is almost always relevant. So strategic would be, as an example, if you've got a restaurant, a good buyer could be a catering company, or it could be another restaurant, it could be a bar. Right? All of those types of businesses that are kind of ancillary or fits somewhere along the supply chain. So if it's a service provider, they might look at getting sold to another service provider who does something similar, or it could be someone who is actually selling the supplies to them, right? They might want to buy a service delivery element and add to their business. So there's some strategic thought that's going to go into that. We're going to talk with the business owner themselves to figure out who needs to be on that list and who shouldn't be. Sometimes the who shouldn't be is more important. There might be some folks that they've had some run-ins, competitors or suppliers or whatever. So always want to get the no-go list as well. But we'll reach out to them. So our team will actually reach out to them in a non-disclosed fashion. So be very vague. Won't mention any details about the business name, where it is, because we're very conscious of those things. And then lastly, we list on the main business listing sites. So the most well-known would be BizBuySell. BizQuest is another really well-known one. So we'll list on all those sites depending on what's going to be the best fit for the industry and the size. Some bigger businesses we might list on a site called Axial. So from there, our goal is to generate as much interest from buyers as we can. And as those buyers come in, they sign NDAs. We qualify them to make sure that they're actually capable of buying a business, and specifically this business. And then we share some of that marketing material. So it's going to be the marketing book, as well as some high-level financials. Redacted taxes is usually included in that. So we'll take the taxes and get rid of all of the confidential, the crucial information that we don't want getting shared. And then our job is just have conversations with those buyers until they feel like they're at a point where they're either ready to make an offer or they're almost ready. Usually the almost ready, the last step is they want to actually have a conversation with the seller. So it kind of depends on the size of the business, whether we do that or not. Bigger businesses, we save that for later. Smaller businesses, we find that usually you have to have that conversation before an offer can be put in. But essentially, once we've got the the buyer and they want to draft an offer. Their attorney will help them draft an offer. They submit it, we negotiate it back and forth, and then it's kind of like the engagement ring, of a deal. It doesn't mean that the deal's closed, but there's some commitment there. And usually there's a little bit of resources they have put into it. And then, during that next period, which is the due diligence, kind of like the engagement period where you're engaged, but you're not married, but you're planning on getting married. So you try to find out everything about that business that you can as a buyer. And that's where a lot of our initial due diligence is hopefully going to counteract any issues that they might find. Say it takes 30 days for them to go through due diligence on the business. Usually documents get drafted after that. So you've got an official purchase agreement. You've got settlement statements. You've got non-competes. You've got all sorts of documents that need to go into that. The attorneys draft that. Usually it goes back and forth. But if we can get that done in 2 weeks, and that's a win, means we've got some efficient attorneys, which is not as common as you'd think. Attorneys like to be inefficient sometimes. But once we've got those documents drafted, we set a close date, everything gets signed, and then at closing, everything gets signed and transferred over. And then, that's basically it. Usually there's a training period after the business is sold, and that's going to be negotiated during the process. So say it's a month, 2 months. I've seen up to 2 years where they're going to stick around and work for the company if they're just a key employee or they're very important to the operations. But, that's all outlined in that initial terms. And then, closing, they're paid, and usually our fee comes out of the end sales price.
The thing that strikes me about that is, when you're thinking about working by yourself, the depth of field of potential buyers, that you might have versus the depth of field with Raincatcher. Compare and contrast those two.
So my buyer pool is about 1,200. That was what I've been able to collect on my own. Raincatcher's is about 8,500. So the funny thing is there's probably a lot of overlap too. Probably half of mine are people that actually have contacted Raincatcher as well. But, having that extra 7,000 buyers makes a big difference for sure. It doesn't feel as bad when you re-email that list of people who didn't open the initial email you sent, and all of a sudden you get 10 more people who open it, and all of a sudden you have a little bit more interest. It feels a lot better on our end as we send those emails, where otherwise I'm going to I get sent to people spam because it's just, it's just not as powerful.
Some of the stuff, I think, for many of us, once you've done it a bunch of times, you begin to go, well, doesn't everybody know this? And the answer is no, because, you've sold a lot of businesses for business owners. And for the business owner, it may be the first and only time that they sell their business. And I saw a statistic not long ago that said 80% of the business owner's net worth is tied up in his business. And for you, when you're going through the process and the due diligence is going on, characterize some of the behaviors that you make.
I chuckle because imagine two really high-strung people who have kind of set in their ways, right? You've got a business buyer and you've got a business seller. Both have some, grandiose vision of how things are going to go. And then there's the reality, which is usually, nothing like either of them expected. So in every deal, I always say if something hasn't tried to kill the deal when it's in due diligence yet, then I'm concerned.
You've missed something. Yes.
And something's missing, and something's going to come out of the closet or out of some dark corner of this business and bite us hard. Mm-hmm. There's always some big issue or some big conflict that we have to get over or get through. That somehow we just missed. It was just something that the buyer thought and the seller thought, and they just aren't aligned. We have to get over that to get the deal closed.
Misperception could be.
Yeah, but people's feelings get hurt. The business is usually the business owner's baby. It really is. Often a big chunk of their net worth is tied up in that business, and it's been illiquid. They haven't been able to get that money out of it, and now there's this exit sign down the road, and they can see it. And all of a sudden things might start to change, that the dollar amount might decrease because, XYZ and the financials didn't check out, or, this expense was required for the operations of the business and not discretionary, as we call it. So part of my job and part of the reason why I like this job so much is I get to play shrink a little bit. I talk to somebody, listen to them, let them take all their anger and frustrations out on me. And I take what they've said, repackage it into a nice little, container, give it to the other party and say, here's really what matters. And I get all the emotion out of, all of the emotion that came from that initial call, come with some good logic, some good, here's what we got, here's what we need to get over, take their anger and frustration, try to boil it down to a couple key points and then go back to the other part. It's the wildest thing. I feel like a marriage counselor sometimes.
That business owner, right? And, it would be atypical if this didn't happen in a business sale. Pre going to market, how do you frame that with the business seller?
How do you frame
an expectation that says, this deal is going to die many times before it gets done, or, they're going to call your pretty baby ugly at some point.
We leave that until we've got an offer, I think. Otherwise, they would never start the process with us. We said, this is going to be painful and it's going to be really hard. We don't tell them about that yet. I think we hope that people come in knowing that selling a business is going to be a challenge. But once we get a letter of intent, we've got some really formal, processes and some key messages we want to communicate to that seller to say, hey, here's what you should expect.
Yeah.
This is what they offered. You should be happy if you actually get this at the end of the day. Something might come in and it might drive that price down. Maybe if you get 90% of that initial letter of intent, you should be happy, right? Just kind of think that that's the number we're shooting for. If you have more than that, great. They're going to come in and they're going to pick and pry this business apart, and they're going to find all the reasons they shouldn't buy it. And they're going to try to convince you that, they're not going to buy it because of X, Y, Z, but really they just want to feel more comfortable. They're putting a big chunk of their personal investment and, their credit on the line to buy this business, and they got to make sure that everything checks out. So really it's just about communicating up front. I think letting them know what's coming. And then as it's coming, it's like, I told you this would happen. So this isn't a surprise. We knew this would happen. Here's how we're going to address it. Here's how we're going to get over it. And then just taking it bit by bit. Right? It's kind of that saying. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time. How do you sell a business? One small conversation at a time is how you do it.
If you mentioned earlier the John Warlow's diagnostic tools. How do you guys deploy that tool for the business owner that's thinking about selling? And then the second part of that question is, once they complete that, how do you reflect that back to the business owner where they get data or get intel from that report?
Yeah. So I'm going off the top of my head, so bear with me, but essentially there's 8 key areas that assessment focuses on. So we'll send the assessment out. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes for a business owner to go through it. And they've got a custom computation method behind it. So you put X answers in, it'll tell you how you score in each of those key areas. So the way I use it personally is I use it to identify some potential problems that I might not have known or so anything else. If all of a sudden I think that they're one thing and their score comes back another, it just provides an opportunity for me to ask questions and learn more. I think being surprised is something I don't like to happen in my line of work. And sometimes it happens, but I just don't like it. It's like never asking a question you don't know the answer to is, it's a good model for attorneys. It's a good model for me. But, basically within that 8 pieces, we can say, here's what's going to make this business difficult to sell. Here's some areas that we could fix that are going to make this easier to sell. Here are the things we really want to focus on because they're such strengths. Mm-hmm. And that's really how we use that assessment. And, I think it's really helpful because Warlow's study was, his whole business is based off big data. So they've got something like 62,000 business owners who have completed this assessment, which is a lot, right? I mean, that's business owners sitting down for 15 minutes and answering pretty, detailed and, important questions. They're answering those that potentially they've never talked to anybody about some of these things that are in there. So they've got that data to then build their model that says, do X, Y, and Z if you want to grow the value of your business. So because of that, I don't have to say this is Cameron's opinion or this is Raincatcher's opinion. I can say this is data driven based off of 62,000 business owners input who all are trying to sell their business.
I actually had John Warlow on the show, on the podcast.
Oh, that's cool. I met him in Canada. I did the value builder certification.
Right. And I think about, the reason you ask the questions is because they're value drivers in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts on, so let's say I'm a business owner and I complete the survey and I fall in the 40 or 50th percentile, right? And really, you kind of go, well, I want to be in the middle of the pack. I want to be, at the upper end of the pack.
Yeah.
What do you think happens to the business valuation if you move from 40 or 50% of the pack to the upper quadrant of the pack? What happens to those guys?
Yeah. So being in the 50 percentile is not a bad thing. It just means you have an average business.
Mm-hmm.
That average business can be sold, but it's not going to be selling at a premium. So by doing all the things you need to do to make your business more sellable, two things will happen. One, you'll enjoy running your business more and you might not want to sell it anymore. That's the funny thing that happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
If you can build a business that is highly sellable, usually it means that you're not involved day to day in the business. You've got lots of processes and systems in place. So you're probably, if you like golfing, you're probably golfing a lot if you have a business that's like that. But the other thing that's going to happen is you might actually get approached by buyers. They'll see your business and they'll actually come in and they'll likely put an offer in. I think the businesses that score over 80 on that assessment, most of those business owners say that they've actually been approached and given a written offer out of the blue, like, an unsolicited offer. Now, the other thing that's usually this is the data, but usually what they'll say is that if you can score above 80, you will sell for 70% more than you would had you scored in the 50th percentile. I want to check that data because it's been some time. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but it's substantially more.
Substantially more. The 70, it might be 50, it might be 70, but it's somewhere in that range where it's significant. Instead of $1 million, it's $1.5 million or $1.7 million.
And so I'm back to being me, and I'm somewhere in the middle or below the middle. And I'm going 2, 7, and 4 are the areas that I'm really need to focus on to move my score. And if I knew how to move my score, I'd have moved it.
Yeah.
So, or if I was even aware that I needed to move that score, I would have. And so I need to move it. I'm willing to take and put in the effort. Is that where the training and folks, the Susan Fru's crowd at Raincatcher come in?
Yeah. So for those who don't know Susan Fru, she's a well-known speaker in the business sector. So she'll speak at a lot of conferences. You might have actually heard or seen her at some point, but she leads our coaching program at Raincatcher.
She's a business owner.
She also is a business owner. She's got a HVAC, plumbing and heating business here in Denver.
Round trip in that thing. So she's been there, done that.
Correct. Yeah. And she's actually my accountability partner. So like every week we talk. So I know Susan pretty well, and like what her goals are and whether she's hitting them or not. And, it's fun to know someone on that deep of a level, but
how's she doing on CrossFit? Is she still getting after it on CrossFit?
We don't talk about CrossFit, but she looks like it. She does some CrossFit. So I wouldn't want to arm wrestle. I think she might beat me, but so that's essentially where our coaches do come in and, to take a business from where it is to make it sellable, it's going to take time, maybe a year, 2 years. And if you've got the mentality, that growth mentality, mm-hmm. and you can realize that what got you to where you are isn't going to be what's going to get you to that next level. And you recognize that you need help and you're willing to pay someone who's knowledgeable for that help, then it's definitely possible. It's definitely, something that can be done. And as a broker, I always used to tell people my second favorite answer is no, right? My favorite answer is yes. Second favorite's no. So since I've started working with Raincatcher, no has become my third favorite. My second favorite is no, but I'm going to go coach and get my business better and come back to you. Because more often than not, if we can help that business owner make their business more sellable, they're going to come back to us, and everybody's going to win in the long run. Us who are success based, and paid on the total sales price of a business are going to succeed and be more successful. But also that seller is going to walk away with more money at the end of the day from the sale.
For me, it's kind of this virtual circle type thing. So I've got some gaps. All right, I can solve the gaps by taking training. So I've invested money in the training, and you go, so let's say that the business, because I did the training and improve it, it's worth half again as much as it might have been, or some larger number. And really that number only has to exceed the cost of training.
Yeah. That's the funny part, right? When you're talking about the value of a business, let's say that you've got a business that's, I'm just going to throw some random numbers out here, but let's say you've got a business that's doing 5 million of revenue and you're doing 500,000 of profit, of adjusted profit. It's about 10% margins. Mm-hmm. Normally your business sales price is going to be based off of a multiple of your business profits. So if you can take training, and let's say I meet you today and the multiple on your business is at 2. If you can implement a couple things and get your multiple up to a 2.5, right? That's half of 1 year's profit more that you're going to get in the sales price. So let's say that the coaching is $1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. The return on your investment's insane, right? It'd be putting in $12,000 in a year and gaining, $250,000 in value in your business in just, that short period of time. And that's assuming you only can get like half multiple higher. If you can get a full multiple, right? It's, again, using just round numbers, it'd be like $12,000 in, and then you get $500,000 more when you sell your business. It's a no brainer, but you have to have someone who's willing to put in the work. And that's the key thing.
I look at the leverage and, you think as a business owner, what would I do to move my business a half multiple? What would I have to go buy another piece of equipment or buy another company or whatever it is that you do? And you go, what if I just make this one more attractive and more efficient?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the crazy thing about my previous example is more often than not, that 500 is going to grow.
Yes.
So not only are you getting a larger multiple, you're getting a larger multiple of a bigger number.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how you can get a 70% bigger sales price through implementing the different things that some of the, John Warlow and the people at Value Builder do preach. And I don't work for Value Builder at all. I did some of their training and, I believe in the program. So it sounds like it might be selling value. I'm not.
You guys offer, I think, on your website for free.
Yeah, we do. We'll do the Value Builder assessment and walk you through the results for free.
And before I forget, where do people find you on social media? How do they find you?
So me personally, I'm on LinkedIn. That's about it, to be honest.
Cameron, spelled out Kolb, Kolb.
Kolb. Yep. If you search Cameron Kolb Raincatcher, you'll find me. If you Cameron Raincatcher, you won't. There's 2 of us, so you might get us confused. I've only met like 3 Camerons, and I happen to work with one of them.
The part about the leverage in the business, and I was involved in the exit planning space myself, and they talk about having an exit ready business is just good business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you think about it and go, basically people want to buy really good businesses, and if you have a really good business, then you get paid more for it. So it's kind of that virtual loop again. Mm-hmm. In thinking about, I had a thought, and it'll come back. It will. But, for the business owner that's on the fence out there right now going, I really don't know that if I want to sell it or not. And, and what if I reach out to Cameron, what should I expect from at the end of the first conversation?
I would say transparency. That's one thing I'm brutally honest with people, almost to a fault. I just believe that honesty is something that's gone missing in a lot of sales. So if you say, what's my business worth? I'm not going to blow smoke. I'm going to say, here's probably what it's worth, and I'm probably going to be on the conservative side because I don't ever want to set expectations that are incorrect, because expectations that are set incorrectly kill deals all the time. I see it almost every week where we've got some seller who might not have gotten the correct expectations somewhere along the way. They want this, in reality, we should have told them that, this was where things are, but we might have told them this to get them to sign with us.
And it came back to me in practical terms. I'm the business owner, and you go, okay, I sell it for X, right? And I get some percentage less X after taxes. And I think I can live on that net proceeds after tax sale, and maybe an earnout, maybe not. And what I think from my perspective, a lot of business owners don't really spend a lot of time pre-sale thinking about what do I really need
Mm-hmm.
and support my lifestyle and live like I want to. And you saw that in your earlier life in doing
that. Yeah, absolutely. So you'd mentioned having a business ready, sell ready, right? Exit ready.
Yep.
Think or build a business with the end in mind. Is how I've heard it phrased as well. So I think one of the things that's really important as you're a business owner is to make sure that you've got all your what ifs taken care of. Because exits, they can be what we're talking about, which is I sell to an outside party, they buy the business, I get a big check. But it could be key employees leave. You've got too much dependency on one employee, and they decide, I don't want to do this on my own. All of a sudden, 80, 90% of your revenue walks out the door. So having correct compensation plans in place to keep those employees around, right? Those are like little things that you just don't quite think about because so many people are working in the business that they don't necessarily work on the business. Another, kind of dark thing that you should always make sure you've got life insurance worth what, in the amount that you would hope that your business would be worth, and have that evaluated. Life insurance is boring. Like, it's one of the toughest things to sell. Like whenever I'm at a business on site and let's say I'm dressed too nice, and the seller's like, oh, what do I say if someone asks, who you are? I always say, just tell them a life insurance salesman. They'll stay away from me. But having insurance in place is really important in making sure that having life insurance on some of those key employees, God forbid something happens to somebody, you don't want that business value to just fall off a cliff because of that. Make sure you've got disability insurance. You can do a disability buyout. If you've got two partners on a business, the likelihood goes up. So make sure that you've got insurance on each of those people, because more often than not, if they don't have insurance, what happens is, business owner A passes away, business owner A's spouse comes in, business owner B is like, I don't want to be business partners with, the spouse. They don't have the skill set that is needed to make this thing successful. So you just get insurance in the amount that you need. And then essentially the spouse is paid out, the value of the business, and then the whole business is the other partners. And, there's just weird little things that are important to do. And life insurance is so cheap. It seems like such a silly thing to do, but.
And I think from the buyer's perspective, they're going through and they go, oh, that was smart. Oh, that was smart.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's, pretty soon you build this whole chain of that was smart.
Mm-hmm.
That was smart. That was smart. And pretty soon they kind of go, my due diligence process and de-risking my potential purchase gets easier and easier as they look.
Yep. Yeah. It's, imagine that you're a buyer coming in and you're looking at a business, and let's say there's three key management people. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's a director of operations, a chief financial person, and, some key manager who's just really hard to replace. And your initial thought is, man, this business is really dependent on those three people. What happens if I buy this business and one of them leaves? But then all of a sudden the seller says, well, I've got this deferred comp plan. There's this day bonus built into their compensation. So, if they stay 3 years, they get X. Mm-hmm. So if they leave, that goes away. They don't get any of it. So we've got some things built in to help make sure that the value of this business stays what it is now or grows once you take it over, and here's how we've done it. That's just a whole different conversation than someone who's like, well, I don't know, they could leave. It's never really something I've been, really thought about that. And it's just the weird things that I've come across in my career of like, I never would have thought that mattered. But all of a sudden, once you know that it's an option, you're like, how can you ever not have that in place?
And for a somewhat sophisticated buyer, they can imagine all the good stuff. I mean, good's easy to handle. Mm-hmm. And you go, what could go wrong with this deal and what puts me at risk? And you start dissecting what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. And you go, wow, if that one guy leaves, I'm done.
Yep.
I can't bolt this business onto mine, and I can see it. And I sold one business one time, and it was the first time I did. And the person that bought it had done hundreds. And in retrospect, there's a lot of things that I did not provide for correctly because I did not know. If it's not in writing, it isn't in writing, kind of.
Yeah, so. And it's funny, but that's where a lot of advisors should be helping those business owners out. Right? They should have a really good accountant. They should have a really good attorney that they're meeting with regularly. They should have a really good wealth planner, a good insurance person. These are all things that I think every business owner needs to be, needs to have in their back pocket. But sometimes life just gets busy. If you're working 60 hours on your business, how do you find 5 hours a year or 5 hours a quarter?
The past 20 years haven't exactly been smooth. And so the business owners have been through the roller coaster, and some of the life events that have happened, go through. And, I think for a lot of the business owners, they spent so much time keeping the money in their business. They really have not contemplated going from driving to writing. I drove my business. I don't see it as a big risk. I've now sold my business and go like, how do I create the revenue stream and not scare myself to death?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of the funny thing that I always found. Like when we did financial planning, we would tell a business owner what their business needs to be worth in order to, for them to be able to retire. And then the funny thing would be like the business wasn't worth that. So how do we connect those dots? And sometimes we'll work with a client who's selling a business. We make sure that they're talking to a wealth planner, and all of a sudden the next time we talk to them, they're like, well, I actually need this amount from the business sale. And we're like, whoa, like we had talked and this is what the value was, what happened, what changed. And usually it's they talk to a wealth planner, and, the wealth planner told them what they needed to get that X percent. And, that's a super powerful and important job, but sometimes it's tough when those two conversations didn't happen between the M&A or the business broker and the wealth planner.
And for a business owner, I think about it, there's always that discussion, 60, 44% is kind of what you can expect, that kind of gig. And you go, well, what if you have income producing, portions? What if you own the real estate and you sell the business and you lease back the deal? And so it ends up just being a math dance for these folks.
It really does. Yep.
For so many of the folks out there that, are getting ready to sell their business, I always tell folks is that when you enter something, you need to know when you're going to exit. It's just, that's just how you enter, indoor, outdoor. I mean, you got to have both. And thinking about the value builder process that you guys have, where you're talking about, we got to have good financials. Well, what does that mean? What does a good financial look like? It's like, I should be taller, but
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's hard to describe good financials, but you know them when you see them. They're clean. They make sense. It doesn't take any explanation for you to understand what's going on with them. You're not like, what the heck is this expense here? And why is it so big? And, that's how I describe good financials, right? They're easy to understand and interpret, and you don't have to do a lot of extra math to figure it out.
You mean checking the balance of your checking account at the end of the month? It's not good financials?
Well, I mean, some people it is. If you want to sell your business, you'd probably take a couple extra steps.
Yeah, not so much. Well, Cameron, I really appreciate, that you're out there making a difference with the business owners. I mean, for the business owners says, maybe I'm not ready yet. Having a conversation is really important earlier. Mm-hmm. And then you start making sure if somebody says you got to have good financials, just tell me what they look like. I need to know the value drivers or value levers. Which ones am I pulling? Which ones am I missing? Mm-hmm. Make sure that you're very direct about what you're doing. If you have, an opportunity for a big contract with low margin versus, a broadly diversified margin, higher margin products, or, you've got supplier concentration, all those kinds of things you can address over the next couple of years. Yep. So having a conversation with Cameron, I think could be a good thing to do. And I mean, he's a normal guy. I mean, you can see the video. He looks normal.
Looks can be deceiving.
But the whole idea is to spend as much time thinking about exit, because you're going to exit your business one way or another. Mm-hmm. And it's like when I have a client come in and says, if I die, and I said, well, if you don't, you'll be the first one. So good luck with that. But business owner, and I'm obviously a fan of business owners, so I wouldn't have the podcast and trying to record what they do and their wisdom. So Cameron, In closing, anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I would just say you gave a list of all the things that you want to address. And I'll tell you, every single one of those has gotten in the way of getting a deal done. We've had to overcome it, whether it be the supplier concentration, customer concentration, all those things. So sometimes the things you don't know are the things that are going to kill the deal. And you didn't even think it was an issue. So I would say, myself, a lot of the other brokers at Raincatcher, we love investing in a future relationship, spending time to create that relationship and then following that relationship through to help you actually achieve what you want. So, even if you're just kind of curious, what does that process look like? What things might I be missing about my business that might be important to know? Even if it's 2-3 years away from when I'm thinking about selling, just have a conversation. I would say we're always open to conversations. And we're happy to help. That's why I got into this business, is to help.
Yeah. And for the listener out there, it's not like they're going to put you on the clock and bill you on an hourly basis.
No. We're at a deal table. We're the only person who doesn't bill by the hour. It's just kind of funny.
Yes. You bill by success.
We're paid when we get things done, not by how much time it takes for us to draft a document or, have a conversation. So.
Well, Cameron, I really appreciate you taking time on a Friday afternoon, and
happy to do it.
Well, you take care and we will talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bob. Have a good weekend.